Hey there, fourth grade. It's me, Mr. Remedies, here with today's mini lesson. Today, we're going to jump into a unit all about some skills and what we call author's craft. So, boom. Today, we're talking about studying authors to learn about their craft. And as always, we have some learning goals, success criteria, so that way we know how and what we're trying to accomplish and how we can measure our success. So let's truck on over to those right now. Today, our learning goal, boom, right here, off to the side here, we are learning to recognize characteristics of an author's writing across several books, all right? Along the way, we have some success criteria. They're right below me. And that way we can say some I can statements that help us kind of monitor our learning, help us understand we're on the right track. Today, we got 4 of them for you. 1, I can define author's craft, which is a big overarching idea we're going to talk about this week. 2, I can understand that an author usually writes several books. 3, I can identify the characteristics of a book. And a big one here, I can tell the difference between characteristics that are always part of a book or always present versus often present in books by the same author. All right, we got a lot to cover today. Today we're going to start something new. We got a new segment in our lesson called Real Talk with Remedies. Boom, real talk time. All right, so first things first, before we get into any definitions or anything, we have to really understand, boys and girls, that being an author is a career. It is a job, okay? And people make a living doing it, right? And you know what? Some people can make a pretty darn good living doing it as well, right? So first and foremost, we have to really understand that being an author is and can be a full-time job. It requires skills. It requires improvement. It requires the drive to get better. Okay, and authors don't just usually write just one book and they're done. Okay, they write many books because since it is their job, they want to provide for their family, and the people that are buying their books want more of their books. So please be aware, writers are professionals. An author will write many books because that is their job. Okay? All right. I've been Mr. Remedies. This has been Real Talk with Remedies. Hopefully, sweet graphic right there. Now, let's move on to author's craft. This is our main vocabulary word for the day. So, author's craft is anything done by an author to make their writing look and sound a certain way. Okay? We're talking all about choices, inspiration. We're going to cover a lot of ideas throughout the lessons this week. So, author's craft, when I say that in my lessons, we're talking about anything done by an author to make their writing look and sound a certain way. We're talking about the art of writing. Right? We're talking about the art of writing. And now, whether we're talking about an author writing a children's books, or whether we're talking about your favorite song, that required some sort of author's craft. Okay? And so we're talking about the art of writing this week. And I know you can see it on my face. I really enjoy this. I love talking about the art of writing. Right? So now that we have that definition out of the way, let's trek on over to our example. But before we get to that example, let's talk about the characteristics of a book. That way we know what kind of patterns we can be looking for when we talk about books written by the same author, right? So an example of, can you guys think of some? Hopefully you got some ideas popping up in your good old brain pieces right now. Can you think of some ideas, some characteristics of a book? How about the setting? The setting is a characteristic of a book. Likewise, the plot, what the characters are doing, what the action and the story involves, that's a characteristics of a book. The genre itself, sci-fi, historical fiction, realistic fiction, fantasy, right? Biographies, those are genres, right? So that's a characteristic of a book. Likewise, the type of characters, and when we talk about the type of characters, What we mean by that is, does the author typically have the same kinds of characters? Is there always like a family dynamic? Is there always like a loving mother figure? Is there always like a grumpy uncle? Is there always like a grandparent or an older figure? Things like that. Okay. And then quite literally some of the same types of characters. If you're writing a series, then some of the characters are going to be exactly the same. Also, a characteristic could be point of view. I know that's a big thing here at Fairview Miss Jewel that we're studying on campus is point of view is, our book's written from first person, where the narrator is experiencing the book, or is it written from third person where the narrator kind of knows everything that's going on at all times? So that's a characteristic we definitely need to be watching out for. It's a huge part of analyzing author's craft. Another one could be the culture of the characters. Do they seem to be of similar cultures across many different books? Okay. And we can see the message might be similar. Perhaps an author writes many different books, but they generally have similar messages. And I will find out that happens quite often. And something even as simple or technical as the amount of dialogue in a book may be a characteristic that is common across many books by the same author. So these are some characteristics we want to be on the lookout. We want to kind of be mindful of as we read different books by the same author, so we can start to see patterns and really break down the art of the author. Right? We got characteristics out of the way. Boom, that's one of our success criteria, being able to identify some of these characteristics. Let's move on to an example. Pow! We're going to talk about the books of Alan Say. We've seen quite a few of Mr. Say's books in our interactive read alouds. Right? And you may be familiar with quite a few of them. Maybe some of them you forgot, but you can always go back to your previous lessons and give them a good old rewatch. Right? The Lost Lake was one of my favorite ones. And this book, Almond, seems really interesting. So this is not all of Mr. Say's work, but just a sampling of some of his work. Okay? Some we've read, like Tea with Milk, The Sign Painter, The Kamishiba Man, and The Lost Lake. And some that I think I'm going to check out soon, like The Innkeeper's Apprentice and Almond. All right, so I want you to think back to the books we've read by Alan Say, Tea with Milk, The Lost Lake, and others, and really ask yourself, what did they all have in common? Did they have similarities? What characteristics did they have in common? Because you know what kind of question I'm going to ask you. Pow! What did you notice about all these books? All right. When we think about these books, we can ask ourselves, what does Alan Say always include in his books? What are the characteristics that are always present throughout his books? And I bet you're thinking to yourself, well, Mr. Remedies, I know that Alan Say is both the author and the illustrator. What an amazing person to be able to write cool stories and create beautiful, beautiful illustrations. The dialogue in all of his books moves the story, especially in Tea with Milk, where a large portion of it are the two main characters talking to each other in the department store, and The Lost Lake, where the boy and his father are talking about finding this lake and going on this hike. So very, very important to note that in Alan Say's books, the dialogue always moves the story. And he writes fiction stories. So this is an example of the genre being a characteristic that is common and always present throughout his books. Okay? So Mr. Say is a fiction writer. But then I want you guys to ask yourself, what is often present? Not always, but often present in Say's work. The story is told in the first person point of view. The Lost Lake was written from the point of view of the little boy, and Tea with Milk was written from the perspective of the young lady that grew up to be a translator. But however, the Kamishiba Man was written in third person, so it was not told from the viewpoint of a character. The main character is usually on a journey, often like the Lost Lake, right? And the Sign Painter. The story often involves family, like the Lost Lake, the Kamishibai man talked about the older couple. He uses details from his own life, which is kind of very, very cool. Alan Say is an Asian American, so he uses a lot of details from his life, and he kind of takes some of his culture and infuses it within his stories. Very, very cool. And he wants you to learn about that culture because it might be different from your own, which I think is an amazing thing to do, especially because Miss Remedies used to live in a different country. So I think it's really important to understand what Alan Say always includes and what he often includes. Now that we've seen that, let's go to a review. Oh yeah, a little review. We're muscling right on through this. Let's review real quick. Today we reviewed that the author's craft. We defined author's craft because we're going to spend a lot of time on it today, on this week. Author's craft is anything done by an author to make their writing look and sound a certain way. It is the art of writing. We know that authors write several books because it is their job to write several books. That's how they put food on their family. That's their passion. That's what they want to do for a living. But those books share characteristics, and we talked about a couple of them, like the setting, the culture of the characters, the types of characters, the genre, so on and so forth. Most authors have characteristics they always include in their writing, right? And some that they often include, right? So if I pick up an Alan Say book, and I've read 2 or 3 of them, and then I go to read my 4th and 5th one, I bet I can already guess or I can already predict of some of the things that are going to be in that book because of the pattern I've started to notice. And finally, we understand that recognizing these patterns helps us to think critically about the author's decisions and skills as an author. Boom, that's next level reading skills right there. Okay? We want to enjoy the story, but we just don't want to decode the words, sound out the words, read the words, understand what's happening in the story, and be like, peace out, I'm done. We really want to start to think about how the author wrote the story. Where did they get their inspiration from? What details did they include? Why did they choose that word? Okay. We've covered quite a bit of that on our first day in this unit. All right. You guys did an amazing job. I know you have. I've been Mr. Remedies. You guys have been my 4th grade All-Stars. And we will see you, Minyata. Adios, guys.